I like to fly low. I like to watch the trees going by. I'm not a high altitude girl at all. I like the speed of it, and it's very hard to get speed in a little aircraft. And the only way you can get it is to fly low enough to watch stuff going by you.
Ann Wood is not used to getting what she wants the first time. When she tried to get into President Roosevelt's civilian pilot training program, she was initially rebuffed for being a woman. When she first tried to get into an experimental World War II program for women pilots, she was told she was too young. But Ann Wood never took no for an answer.
I wasn't one of those that dreamed of flying at all.
Ann Wood grew up in Waldoboro, Maine, feeling far more comfortable in the world of boys than the world of girls.
I was always in corduroy pants, and my parents gave me a whole football gear at Christmas time so that I could dress up like a football player and go out and play football by myself.
As a youth, the self-described tomboy had shown no particular interest in airplanes. Becoming a pilot was not one of her childhood dreams. But in her late teens, a career opportunity would come knocking in her local newspaper. Nearby Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine, had 12 openings for their civilian pilot training program.
The civilian pilot training program was one of President Roosevelt's visions for the future. And he passed legislation knowing full well that we were going to get into World War II.
Knowing America would soon need thousands of pilots, Roosevelt arranged for the government to entice future recruits with free flight training.
My mother thought it'd be a very good idea, and why didn't I go get it? She pushed me to it. She gave me the idea to want to do it, because I didn't have it on my own. I was finished college, I was going to have to go look for a job, and why didn't I go and try?
Bowdoin wasn't as enthusiastic about training women pilots. Despite meeting all the physical requirements, Wood was told to hold off, even though there were 2 unfilled openings.
Bowdoin at the time was an all-male institution, and they didn't want me. And it seems strange, but they advertised in the Brunswick papers for a boy to come to learn to fly for free for 2 weeks, and nobody came. Then wonderful president of Bowdoin by the name of President Sills said, well, she'll be down there on the water. We were going to be on float planes. And nobody will know she's here. And let's go with her.
Upon graduation from the civilian pilot program in 1940, Wood eventually became a flight instructor at Bowdoin, but most of her students would soon abandon her. After the attack at Pearl Harbor, the military was grabbing every pilot it could get. Wood wanted to volunteer too.
All of my students had already signed up for their service. They were either going into the Army, the Air Corps, or the Navy. So I then began to search as to where and how a woman could serve. And that was a long and tedious search, because I was constantly turned down. It's like writing a novel and you're turned down.
On January 24, 1942, Wood received a telegram she would remember for the rest of her life. It came from Jackie Cochran, the celebrated racing pilot and Manhattan socialite. Cochran, one of the most famous women in America at the time, was trying to form an all-women's pilot corps for the United States military, but the Air Force turned her down. The British, however, wanted her to recruit 200 American women pilots to ferry new military aircraft from the factory to the front lines. Cochran only agreed to recruit 24 pilots, hoping the overseas experiment would convince the U.S. military they could use women's help too.
The telegram basically said she was recruiting for the British Air Transport Auxiliary, and if I had the qualifications, she would interview me. She sent it to every woman pilot that had 350 hours. Initially, I was not accepted. I was amongst the youngest, and I also had the least time at that time. Some were married with children, and she really didn't want to get into that kind of a situation where women were going off and leaving their children. So she eventually got down to me. I was terribly eager. I came from a very patriotic family, and I wanted to be a participant in whatever fashion I could. And of course I wanted to do it in the fly world, and if I couldn't do it here, I was going to do it wherever I could.
Over the course of the war, Wood would fly 75 different kinds of aircraft, most of them British Spitfires. She was stationed in Birmingham, near the RAF's largest Spitfire factory.
Oh, this is that magic little book that tells you how to fly every aircraft if you've forgotten for any reason. And this you carried with you all the time. If you were ferrying an aircraft for the first time, a new aircraft, you spent more time prepping on it before you left your base in the morning. But you didn't necessarily always have that kind of time. So therefore, this little book was very important to you. We were not to go through the clouds, but of course you couldn't fly in England without doing that and get anywhere, in all probability. So you had to have a little bit of risk in you. Bear in mind that my group had no radios, so we had to use time and distance only. You get lost, you're in fog, and you don't know where the hell you are. Show you how safe mechanically they were. I never had, in my 4 years, a bad takeoff from a factory.
Though allies on the runway, British and American pilots often playfully ribbed one another.
The Brits had a word for an aircraft if it wasn't working. They had it down as US, unserviceable. Well, some of our girls got spuse with rage about that. Imagine calling that US. Of course, I thought it was funny, you see. It just depends how it struck you.
In late September 1942, the United States declared its intention to also use women pilots. While some Americans flying for Britain were eager to come home, Wood never considered it.
I was in the right theater. You had to retrain over here. You had to go to Sweetwater, Texas. Who wanted that when I was in the theater? Some of our girls did. They never felt comfortable in the foreign theater. I was perfectly at home and having a wonderful time and doing a more, I think, critical job and a hell of a lot more fun.
Wood got closer to the action than she ever imagined. An after-dinner stroll in June 1944 still remains vivid in her memory.
Suddenly, we had double summertime then, so it's 11 o'clock at night. Still sort of light. And suddenly, the sky is ablaze with aircraft. You can't see the sky because it's just black, black, black aircraft. So we know that D-Day is on.
Wood and some friends spent the next morning gathering strawberries and distributing them to troops waiting to storm the beaches at Normandy.
It's June 6th. Strawberry time is marvelous over there. They're much sweeter, succulent than ours. And what were the boys doing? All kinds of different things. You know, some were having their haircuts, some were writing letters, some were reading the comics, some were just a-setting, and some were sleeping. And yet as you gave them strawberries, and they were so appreciative of them, you knew that for many, that would be their last strawberry. Here is my uniform in all its glory, made for me in 1942, and I guess its claim to fame is that my claim to fame is that I can still get into it.
For her service to the Allies, Wood was awarded the King's Medal, one of Great Britain's highest military honors. Following the war, Wood served as an assistant to America's first civil air attaché in London. She went on to several management posts in the airline industry, capping her career by becoming Pan Am's first woman vice president. Today, she continues to soar in the clouds, occasionally flying a Piper Arrow at Beverly Airport. While proud of her World War II accomplishments, Wood says she doesn't think of herself as an aviation pioneer.
Well, you don't really have any control over your timing, do you? Who do you thank for that?